My name is Claire Donovan. I was 28 years old when my sister decided to turn one of the most humiliating days of my life into entertainment for everyone she knew. By the time I finished carrying the last box to my car, she had already posted a photo of me on Facebook. I was standing there in old jeans, sweaty, tired, my hair tied back, holding a lamp in one hand and a trash bag full of clothes in the other. Her caption was short, cruel, and exactly the kind of thing she knew people would laugh at. Finally, the freeloader is gone. Within 10 minutes, the post had 123 likes. Then the comments started pouring in. My mother wrote that now she would not have to cook for me or take care of me anymore. My father replied that at least he would not have to look at that useless failure every day. People I had known for years joined in like they had been waiting for permission to mock me in public. Some called me lazy, some called me pathetic. A few acted like I had spent my whole adult life draining my family dry. I read every word. Then I did something none of them expected. I took screenshots of everything, every comment, every reaction, every smug little joke, and then I liked the post. I liked every single comment under it. I wanted them relaxed. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to enjoy their little victory for exactly 1 week. Because 7 days later, the same people who laughed at that picture were pounding on my front door so hard it sounded like they wanted to break it down. My mother was crying. My father looked like he had not slept. And my sister, the one who had posted that photo, stood there pale and shaking, screaming the same words over and over. It is not true. Tell me it is not true. The truth was, they had spent years telling a story about me that made them feel better about themselves. What they never understood was that I had my own version of the story, and theirs was about to fall apart. The story really started 8 years earlier, when my grandmother Evelyn died, and left behind the one thing my parents had always acted like they deserved, simply because they lived in it: the house. It was a 3-bedroom place in Naperville, the same house I had grown up in, the same house where every holiday dinner turned into some loud performance about family, sacrifice, and all the things my parents claimed they had done for everyone else. What nobody outside the family knew was that Grandma had not trusted my father with money for years. He had borrowed from her more than once, and somehow always had a reason he could not pay her back. By the time she got sick, she had seen enough. So when her will was read, the house did not go to my parents. It went to me. I was 20 years old, shocked, grieving, and too overwhelmed to even understand what that really meant. My parents did understand it. They heard every word the attorney said. Grandma had made it clear that they could continue living there, but the house belonged to me. Legally, completely. No confusion about it. They just never treated it that way. Almost immediately, they started acting like the paperwork was some technical detail that did not matter. My father still called it his house. My mother still made decisions about repairs, furniture, and who got invited over without asking me. They hosted barbecues in the backyard and let people walk through the place like they were proud homeowners showing off what they had built. And I let it happen, mostly because I was young, still in school, working part-time, and not ready for the kind of war I knew would start if I pushed back too hard. What made it worse was that even though the house was legally mine, they still made me pay $400 a month to live there. They called it helping with expenses, teaching responsibility, contributing like an adult. I paid it because at the time I thought keeping the peace was worth it. Month after month, year after year, I handed over money to live in a house that already belonged to me. By the end of 8 years, I had paid them $38,400 for the privilege of being treated like an unwanted guest in my own property. And somehow, even with all of that, they still managed to convince themselves that I was the burden. That was the part that stayed with me. Not just the disrespect, but the absolute confidence with which they lived inside a lie. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. They thought silence meant I did not see what they were doing. What they never realized was that silence can look a lot like surrender right before it becomes strategy. By the time I was in my mid-20s, my family had built an entire version of me that had almost nothing to do with reality. In their story, I was lazy, unemployed, immature, and still living at home because I could not function as an adult. It was a convenient story for them because it made them look generous and patient, and it gave them someone to look down on whenever they needed to feel better about their own lives. The truth was a lot less dramatic and a lot more threatening to the image they wanted to protect. I was working the whole time. Not at a store, not in an office, not in any kind of job they would respect, which was exactly why I stopped trying to explain it. From my bedroom, I built a steady career as an email marketing strategist and conversion copywriter for small e-commerce brands. I wrote campaigns, managed launches, built customer flows, and helped businesses make money. It started small, with inconsistent freelance gigs and clients who paid late, but over time it became real money, then good money, then enough money that I understood something my family never did. I did not need their approval. I only needed time. My father mocked anything that happened on a laptop. If I was working at my desk when he walked past my room, he would smirk and say things like, "Let me know when you get a real job." My mother loved telling people she was exhausted from still having to take care of me, even though I bought my own groceries, did my own laundry, and stayed out of everyone's way as much as possible. Half the meals she complained about making for me were meals I never asked for in the first place. She liked the performance of being the suffering mother more than she liked the truth. My sister Paige was worse in a different way. She did not just judge me inside the house. She exported the story. She told friends I slept all day, played on my computer, and lived off our parents because I was too irresponsible to build a life of my own. Every time I heard that she had repeated some twisted version of my life to someone else, I told myself the same thing. Let her talk. One day she is going to wish she had kept my name out of her mouth. Even my ex, Grant, had absorbed their version of me. When we broke up, he tried to sound kind about it, but the message was obvious. A 27-year-old woman still living with her parents did not fit the future he wanted people to see him with. I remember standing there listening to him explain why this was not working, and realizing that none of these people were embarrassed for me. They were embarrassed by the story they thought I represented. So I stopped defending myself. I stopped correcting people. I stopped trying to prove I was doing something real. Instead, I worked longer hours, signed better clients, saved more money, and kept every plan to myself. While they were laughing at the woman in the back bedroom with a laptop, I was quietly building the life that would let me walk away from all of them on my own terms. They thought they were watching me go nowhere. What they were really watching was a countdown. By the time I finally decided to leave, it was not some emotional impulse after one bad argument or one cruel comment too many. I had been planning that exit for a year and a half, quietly, carefully. Every invoice I got paid, every new client contract I signed, every late night I spent working instead of sleeping went into one goal. I was getting out without asking anyone for help and without giving my family enough warning to ruin it. I found a one-bedroom condo on the north side of Chicago, small but updated, in a building with secure entry and just enough distance to feel like a different world. I bought it outright. No loan, no cosigner, no dramatic speech, no family discussion. Just paperwork, wire transfers, and a set of keys that belonged to me alone. I started moving things little by little while everyone was out. A few boxes in my trunk, winter clothes, work equipment, important documents, anything I knew they might try to hold over me if they figured it out too soon. On the final day, I scheduled movers for the afternoon and waited until the truck was outside before I said anything. My mother was the first to notice. She came into the hallway, looked at the stacked boxes, then at the movers, and asked what was going on in that tone people use when they already think the answer is ridiculous. I told her I was moving out. My father laughed from the kitchen before I even finished the sentence. Paige came downstairs a second later and leaned against the wall like she had front row seats to a joke. They all assumed I was bluffing, or about to say I had found some cheap rental and needed help with the deposit. Instead, I told them I had bought my own place. That stopped them for about 2 seconds. Then the questions started. With what money? Since when? How could I possibly afford that? My father actually asked if someone had co-signed for me because in his mind, there was no version of reality where I had done it on my own. I told them the truth. I had been working for years. Real work. Real clients. Real money. The same work they had mocked every time they walked past my bedroom door. My mother looked stunned, but not because she suddenly felt proud. She looked offended, like I had hidden something from her that she was entitled to know. My father recovered first. He did not ask what neighborhood it was in, or whether it was safe, or even if I was happy. He asked what this meant for the bills in the house. Paige asked why I had acted broke for so long. I told her I had never acted broke. They had simply never listened. Then my mother, like she had skipped over everything that actually mattered, asked if I was still going to help out here and there once I was gone. I remember looking at her and realizing that even in that moment, with my life changing right in front of them, they still saw me as a resource to manage, not a daughter they had pushed too far. So I told them no, calmly, clearly. No, I would not be helping with the utilities. No, I would not be covering emergencies. No, I would not be stepping in every time their poor planning caught up with them. The house had no mortgage anyway. Grandma had made sure of that long before she died. Whatever they did with a fully paid off home was their problem, not mine. That was when my mother started crying and my father called me selfish. Paige rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic, like buying a condo somehow made me important. I did not argue. I just picked up my bag, signed the last paper for the movers, and walked out. I expected relief, and I did feel it. But what I did not expect was how quiet my new place would feel that first night. No one shouting from another room. No one making me feel watched. No one muttering about me like I was a burden they had been cursed with. I sat on my own couch, in my own living room, surrounded by boxes I could unpack whenever I wanted, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Then the next morning, Paige posted that photo. And suddenly I understood that they were not upset I had left. They were upset I had left without needing them. I did not respond to the post. That was the part that really unsettled them later, because people like my family are most comfortable when they can predict your pain. They expected tears, angry messages, maybe a desperate call begging them to take it down. Instead, I gave them nothing. I screenshotted every comment, every reaction, every smug little pile-on from people who had no idea what they were talking about, and then I let them enjoy it. For a full week, I said nothing. I liked the post. I liked my mother's comment. I liked my father's comment. I even liked the nastier replies from people who barely knew me. I wanted them relaxed. I wanted them certain that they had humiliated me in public and gotten away with it. While they were enjoying that feeling, I was doing something else. I called an attorney and told him I was ready to stop letting my family treat my property like their kingdom. He already had copies of the will, the deed, and every document that mattered. All I had to do was say the word. So I did. A formal notice was sent to the house stating exactly what they had spent years pretending was not real. I was the sole legal owner of the property. They were living there only because I had allowed it. That permission was no longer open-ended, and all future terms would be given to them in writing. The letter was delivered on a Friday afternoon. My phone started ringing less than an hour later. First my mother, then my father, then Paige. Over and over again. I let them all go to voicemail. By the evening, my phone looked almost funny. Missed calls, voice messages, texts that shifted from rage to panic and back again within minutes. My mother said there had to be some mistake. My father demanded I call him immediately because this was not how family handled things. Paige sent the same message 3 times in a row, each one more frantic than the last. Tell me this is fake. Tell me you did not do this. Tell me it is not true. I still did not answer. Not until there was pounding at my front door hard enough to rattle the frame. When I checked the camera and saw the 3 of them standing outside my condo, I almost laughed at how different they looked without an audience behind them. My mother's mascara had run. My father looked pale and furious at the same time. And Paige, the one who had posted that photo like she was celebrating the removal of household trash, looked like she could barely breathe. I opened the door just enough to stand in the frame without inviting them in. My mother tried to step forward immediately, crying as she said they needed to talk. My father said this whole thing had gone far enough, like I was the one who had created the scene. Then Paige raised her voice over both of them and shouted, "It is not true. Tell me it is not true." I looked right at her and asked, "Which part? The part where I own the house or the part where I finally decided to act like it?" That shut her up for about 2 seconds. Then the excuses started. My mother said the post had only been a joke. My father said everyone says things online they do not mean. Paige said I was being petty and vindictive over one stupid caption. I remember staring at her and thinking, one stupid caption. As if that was all it had been. Not years of disrespect. Not years of being called lazy in a house that legally belonged to me. Not years of taking my money while telling everyone I was a burden. Just one stupid caption. So I told them no, it was never about one post. The post was just the moment they got too comfortable saying the quiet part out loud in front of the whole world. I reminded my mother exactly what she had written. I repeated my father's comment word for word. I asked Paige if she wanted me to read some of the other replies out loud too, since she had seemed so proud of them a week earlier. None of them had anything to say to that. Then my father changed tactics and tried to sound reasonable. He said if I had concerns, we could discuss them privately as a family. I almost admired the nerve. They had no problem turning me into public entertainment, but now that a legal letter had shown up, suddenly they wanted privacy. I told them every conversation from this point on would happen through proper channels and in writing if necessary. My mother started crying harder. Paige looked at me with the kind of hatred people save for someone who refuses to stay in the role they assign them. My father asked if I was really going to do this to my own family. I said no. I was finally refusing to let my family keep doing this to me. That was the first moment I saw it land. Not the sadness, not the guilt, the fear. Because for the first time they understood that this was not an argument they could bully, shame, or laugh their way out of. And the look on Paige's face told me something even better. She was finally starting to realize that the picture she posted had not humiliated me. It had documented the exact moment she handed me the last reason I needed to stop protecting all of them. By Monday morning, I had sent them their next reality check. Since they had spent the entire weekend leaving voicemails, crying, yelling, and acting like my attorney's letter had somehow been more offensive than years of public humiliation, I decided there was no point pretending we were negotiating as a family. I had my attorney send over a simple month-to-month occupancy agreement. If they wanted to stay in the house, they could stay legally and pay what anyone else would have had to pay for a fully paid-off 3-bedroom home in Naperville. The monthly rent was $2,800. They also had 10 business days to transfer every utility out of my name and into theirs: electric, water, gas, internet, everything. I was done funding the comfort of people who had built an entire identity around calling me a burden. The response came fast and exactly the way I expected. My mother called first, sounding weak and shaky, asking how I could put that kind of price on my own parents. My father followed with a much uglier message saying I was out of my mind if I thought they were going to pay market rent to their own daughter. Paige texted me 6 times in less than an hour, all of them some variation of, "Are you seriously doing this?" I did not answer any of them right away. When I finally replied, I kept it short. "You charged me to live in my own house for 8 years. I am simply correcting the arrangement." That message bought me silence for maybe half a day. Then the bargaining started. My mother said they could maybe manage a smaller amount for a few months. My father wanted to know why I was suddenly acting like a landlord instead of a daughter. Paige, of course, made it all about herself. She said I was destroying the family over pride and that normal people did not punish their relatives like this. I almost laughed at that, because nothing about what they had done to me for years had been normal either. They wanted the comfort of calling it family only when the bill came due. A day later, the real problem finally surfaced. They could not afford the house, not even close. Once the fake outrage started cracking, the numbers came spilling out. They had credit card debt. More than I expected. My father had borrowed money from people and shuffled balances around so many times that even he had lost track of what was owed where. My mother had been barely making minimum payments on cards she had used for groceries, furniture, gifts, and all the little extras that made them feel like they were doing fine when they were not. They had survived all those years because there had been no mortgage and because I had still been feeding money into the house. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not because I felt sorry for them, but because it confirmed what I had already suspected. They had not just enjoyed humiliating me, they had depended on me while mocking me for existing. I gave them the deadline anyway. If they wanted to stay, they signed the agreement. If they did not, they could leave. My attorney sent everything in writing. They still acted like I was bluffing. The utility issue was the part they took least seriously. My father actually left me a voicemail saying, "You cannot just shut off a family home because you are having a tantrum." It would have been funny if it had not been so shameless. I was not shutting anything off. I was refusing to keep it in my name. There is a difference. They had 10 business days to transfer the accounts. They ignored the deadline, probably because they had spent years convincing themselves that I never followed through on anything that made them uncomfortable. Then the day came. I was at my kitchen counter answering emails when my phone started buzzing. First my mother, then my father, then Paige, then all three again. I already knew why. The electric had been disconnected that morning. The gas service was next. Internet went out right after noon. By the evening, the house they had treated like their kingdom felt a lot less secure. My mother's voicemail was almost hysterical. She said the refrigerator was off, the house was freezing, and how could I do this to them? My father shouted that he would never forgive me. Paige sent a voice note calling me evil, cruel, and sick. I saved all of it and did nothing. 2 days later, they were out. Not because I had thrown them onto the street that second, but because Aunt Cheryl agreed to let them stay with her temporarily after my mother called half the family crying. Cheryl lived in a cramped 2-bedroom condo and was exactly the type of relative who loved giving opinions when someone else had to carry the consequences. I heard later that by the second night, she was already regretting it. My father was irritable and humiliated. My mother cried constantly. Paige complained about everything, from the lack of closet space to the fact that Cheryl expected everyone to clean up after themselves. For once, the people who had spent years telling the world how hard it was to live with me were the ones nobody wanted around. And Paige still had not learned. She started posting vague little victim messages online about betrayal, toxic family, and how success reveals who people really are. It might have worked if she had not been the same person who publicly called me a freeloader a week earlier. A few people actually pushed back. One old friend commented asking if this was about the sister she had mocked on Facebook. Another wrote, "You do realize you posted that girl while she was moving, right?" Paige deleted the whole thing within an hour, but not before someone sent me screenshots. That may have been my favorite part of the week. Watching her discover that public humiliation stops being fun when it circles back around. Then, because apparently the universe wanted to add one more insult to all of them, Grant reached out. My ex had not spoken to me in months, but suddenly he wanted to check in. He said he had heard I bought my own place and wanted to see how I was doing. I read the message once, smiled, and blocked him. I was not interested in men who only respected me once other people did. The final blow landed on my father. Desperate for money, he had gone to a coworker named Neil Harper and borrowed cash, promising it was temporary and that things at home were being sorted out. What Neil did not know was that my father had already borrowed from other people at work before, which violated company policy. Once one person started asking questions, the whole thing unraveled. My father was called into a meeting, investigated, and suspended. When I heard about it, I did not celebrate. I just sat there for a second and felt something colder than satisfaction: certainty. This was what happened when people spent too many years building their lives on entitlement and denial. Eventually, reality sends the bill, and for the first time in their lives, nobody was there to quietly pay it for them. By the time the final deadline passed, there was nothing left to negotiate. My parents had not signed the occupancy agreement, had not come up with rent, and had not done anything except cycle between blaming me, begging me, and acting shocked that actions they had laughed at online were now turning into consequences they could not escape in real life. So I moved forward. My attorney filed for eviction, and for the first time, the panic in my family stopped sounding dramatic and started sounding real. My mother called me sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. My father, who had spent years talking to me like I was something he had to tolerate, suddenly sounded smaller every time he left a message. Even Paige changed. Not into a better person, not really, but into someone who had finally realized that mockery feels very different when you are the one standing on the wrong side of it. She stopped posting. She stopped trying to sound clever. She even texted me one night asking if we could just meet somewhere and talk alone, sister to sister, as if she had not built half her social life on making me look pathetic. I ignored it. I had heard enough versions of them wanting to talk once they needed something. What none of them ever understood was that I had wanted understanding years earlier. What I got instead was humiliation, dismissal, and a front-row seat to how easily people can confuse access to you with ownership of you. The eviction process took several weeks, which was fine with me. I was in no rush anymore. That was one of the strangest parts of finally taking control. I did not have to scream. I did not have to threaten. I did not have to prove anything to anyone in the family group chat or on social media. I had documents, timelines, and the kind of patience that only comes from spending years being underestimated. While everything moved through the proper channels, the rest of their lives started collapsing on their own. My father lost his job after the investigation at work finished. It turned out the money issues were worse than even my mother had admitted. He had been borrowing to cover other borrowing for longer than anyone knew. My mother picked up part-time shifts at a grocery store nearby, which would have made me feel sorry for her if she had not spent years telling people I was lazy while quietly depending on me to keep her life easier. Paige moved from acting outraged to acting wounded, then finally to acting invisible. No more smug captions, no more little public performances, no more pretending she had me figured out. Aunt Cheryl got tired of housing all three of them faster than expected, and once the house was officially no longer an option, they had to settle for a cheap rental they would never have looked twice at when they still thought they were above consequences. I heard all of this through extended relatives, because by then I had blocked almost everyone who thought blood should matter more than basic decency. After the house was finally empty, I went back one last time. It was quiet in a way I had never heard before. No television blaring, no passive-aggressive comments drifting in from the kitchen. No footsteps that made me feel like I had to justify my existence in every room I entered. I stood in the living room for a minute and looked around at the place that had shaped so much of my life. For years, that house had felt like proof that I was stuck. In the end, it became proof that I had never been trapped as completely as they wanted me to believe. I had options. I had power. I had just been too conditioned to use them. I cleaned out the last few things I still wanted, met with an agent, and put the house on the market. It sold faster than I expected, and because the home was fully paid off and the market was strong, the sale brought in a profit big enough to change my life in a very quiet, very permanent way. I did not share a dollar of it. I did not explain myself. I did not offer help. A week earlier, Paige had celebrated that the freeloader was finally gone. In the end, the people begging that so-called freeloader for mercy were the same people who had mocked her the loudest. That was the part I carried with me, not because it made me feel powerful, but because it made something painfully clear. They had never been sorry about how they treated me. They were sorry they could not keep doing it without losing something. And once I understood that, any guilt I might have felt disappeared. The truth is, family can love you and still fail you. Family can share your blood and still reduce you to a role that keeps them comfortable. Family can tell the same lie about you for so long that they start believing it themselves. But none of that means you have to stay where you are mocked, used, or slowly erased just to prove you are loyal. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is step back and let people meet the consequences they spent years earning. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. Refusing humiliation is not selfishness. And choosing peace over constant disrespect does not make you cold. It makes you honest. I spent years begging, explaining, shrinking, and staying quiet because I thought endurance made me the better person. What I finally learned is that dignity matters more than endurance when the people around you only value your silence. Walking away did not destroy my family. It only exposed what they had already become. And if there is any lesson in everything that happened, it is this. Never let someone convince you that being related to them gives them the right to humiliate you and still expect your loyalty. Love without respect is just control wearing a softer name. The day I left that house, my sister thought she was posting proof that a burden had finally been removed. What she actually posted was the beginning of the moment I stopped carrying people who had never once been willing to carry me. The team behind Revenge Argon is working hard to create stories that are not only engaging, but also meaningful. We want to make it clear that this is a fictional story, created to share thoughtful lessons and educational messages that can bring viewers both entertainment and insight. One of the strongest educational values in this script is the importance of self-respect and healthy boundaries. It shows that family should never be an excuse for humiliation, control, or emotional harm. In the end, the story encourages viewers to understand their worth, learn from painful experiences, and choose dignity, growth, and wisdom over silence.